What I love about doing Coffee Black is we've been able to create a world where we don't have to explain that. Yeah. We can just do that.
Right.
You know, and I think that's a beautiful thing. That's why I love doing this with y'all too. Thanks. You know what I mean? It's like we wanted this episode. It's a very special episode. Welcome to the Coffee Black Podcast, by the way. We are officially potting.
Willkommen.
Season 4, episode 2. Today we're going to be getting into a couple of different things, but we're going to be getting into the topic of sharecrop coffee, sharecrop capitalism, why an all-black supply chain is important, and what does it mean to be culturally congruent, and how that led us to do a Black Barista Exchange program. So those are kind of the topics we're going to be ciphering on today.
Coffee stay black just like me. Don't need no sugar, don't need no cream.
I hope y'all doing well. Thank everybody who supported and checked out the last episode. Yes. We're rocking with you. We got some good
stuff. It was such a good episode.
It was it was the State of the Union. Like, it's the first one, and I feel like we had to like come correct. So shout out to Prop. Shout out to Tremaine, man. For coming through, Padiri, Terraform, all the things. This episode is a special episode as well. We got Renata Henderson in here in the building with me. People have been asking to hear her perspective on Coffee Black for a long time.
It don't come for free.
It's very rare.
Buying me lunch after this.
I am buying lunch after this.
And paying my mortgage.
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna just give you half of my business.
In real time.
Okay, how about
in real time? In real time.
That's crazy.
This episode is brought to you also at Unapologetic Studios, Outerspace, Maine. Big shout out to the homies for this collaboration. This season has been so fun, and just glad to be here with them. I think it makes so much sense. All of the things that we do, all the things they do. It's Memphis, man. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
And we got 2 guests actually that are going to be instant transmissioning out back and forth during this episode. We got the homie HD3 Beats.
Salute.
The secret sauce behind a lot of the ideas of culturally congruency. Culturally congruent information, I think, is dope. And when we'll talk more about what that means this episode. But this brother has been a big part of the magic behind that.
For a while.
Yeah, barista in training, specialist in training, producer extraordinaire.
God bless you, man.
Philosopher.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Child of God.
Put it on your resume.
First and foremost.
Dag, coding. You know what I mean?
Hold on, exposed.
IT.
Yeah, he was like, all right.
IT.
AC.
Y'all not on that joint? Y'all have seen that video?
I'm not.
There's this video on TikTok from this Nollywood joint. And Nollywood is essentially like Nigerian Bollywood, which Bollywood is, I don't know.
Indian Hollywood.
You know, I was like, what? Bangladesh Hollywood? I don't know.
Bangladesh.
So I'm like, yeah, it's, anyway, there's this joint. It's like, if you're black, nothing for you. If you're white, there's something for you. A whitey. And it's like this Nigerian joint about these Nigerian ladies who be like trying to find like white sponsors, basically. It's hilarious. It's going crazy right now on TikTok. So when we say IT, I was like,
IT. You got a link.
We really should say that today. Bro, I've been thinking about doing something like that on TikTok content. No, it's so real, bro. Apparently it's super old, like it was shot in the 90s.
Okay, there we go.
So that joint is crazy.
That puts it in context.
It's crazy. Just real quick, sound check. The headphones went out. Are we good on sound everywhere else? All right, perfect. Are we back? We back again. Okay, cool.
We back.
So yeah, man, we got a lot of things to get into today for the episode. We're gonna start off just by kind of recapping what just happened. There's a big moment in the company,
what just
Coffee
happened?
Black company. So I just spoke at Vanderbilt. Was invited out to speak with the Institute for Coffee Studies that's out there. It's been around since the 90s.
Didn't know it existed.
Right. A lot of people
didn't know it existed until he was on the panel.
There is an Institute for Coffee Studies at one of the most elite universities and colleges in America.
Ivy League.
Yeah. He told me specifically to say elite colleges and universities.
Oh.
So, you know. I didn't know that either. And apparently what we're doing at Coffee Black is like a big, I don't know, inspiration is the right word, but they're big fans of the work we're doing. And if you don't know, a lot of the work we're doing is influenced by a lot of theoretical stuff that my wife and I studied in grad school, and we're applying that in real life through a for-profit company, through the art we make, things like that. And so like we have a lot of the same sources that are being studied and applied in this institute. And so like man, they're just big fans of the work we're doing, and so they asked us to come out and speak on a panel. So I just got back from Nashville, and it was a crazy experience.
It was great.
Yeah.
Was, as I was watching too, and we can get into this, but as I was watching, I was kind of weighing to what level do we integrate, or not even integrate, to what level do we see the influence that we've been able to have in a place like Vanderbilt, which has been considered this elite, prestigious, college for, is it centuries? I don't. Yeah, I was like, I don't know how they are. I'm sure it's centuries, but just like, we kind of define success in different ways, and being co-signed by the type of university that Vanderbilt is, to me, I just had a lot of things I was processing while I was watching it. So just like the history of the university, I don't know anything about Vanderbilt, but what I do know about, the Ivy Leagues, the colleges that were likely founded in the 1800s and things, like there's a lot of racial history behind them that you have to consider. I think that's kind of a lot of the reason why they have the like the different scholarships and all of this kind of stuff for people of color. So I'm just thinking, like, I don't know, I just kind of was weighing our stance on being co-signed by a university that that I don't know. We have standards that are kind of different from that. So, like, yes, it's Vanderbilt, and that's amazing, and God definitely opened the door. Yeah. And in the same hand, it's just kind of like, I just wonder. I had a lot of
it's crazy
in that way.
I think a lot of the work, when I was talking to Ted Fisher is the author of the book, Making Better Coffee. And I think it was really interesting. That book is one of the best books. I think it's the best book I've read on coffee in the last 10 years. He brings a lot of anthropological perspectives. He's an anthropology professor there. And so he looks at coffee from like a anthropological perspective, and that's the lens of his analysis. And so I love what he's doing. My history is in sociology in undergrad, and then getting more into critical pedagogy through Paulo Freire in grad school. And so, like, there's just a lot of commonality there, right? And so what was really dope was, like, man, he said this explicitly. He was like, Coffee Black is the only space where I've seen people intersect, like, bring the fullness of the political analysis, the fullness of the cultural and the artistic and the creative analysis, and the anthropological analysis as well, and then bring that to bear alongside the scientific and the culinary space that coffee seems to sit in. So it's like these three kind of like pillars for them. It's like, man, there's not a space where that kind of work is being done, that kind of analysis, that kind of research.
At the Institute. Somebody at the Institute.
Yeah, he's the head of the Institute. The head of that institute was like, yo, what y'all are doing is like so unique because there's not another reference point. Nobody else is pushing this work forward in that way. And it's so crazy to think about it because in many ways, I think, to your point, what we're doing, I think, is showing the way forward for a lot of institutions or people who have like had elements of it, but don't know necessarily what the next step is. And it's weird to think that, like, we figured that out in the middle of the hood in North Memphis at the Anti-Gentrification Coffee Club. Like, that's
a bar.
That's crazy, bro. Like, making beats with the homies and making brews with the homies and, like, kind of reading and just bringing our full humanity to bear with no sugar, no cream needed,
That's definitely the point that I wanted to get at. It's just kind of like rewriting, recrafting, restructuring what success looks like and what it means to be like a trailblazer, or like, like what does it mean to do the work that we're doing?
Yeah, and how do you become a trailblazer without losing the things that made you blaze the trail in the first place? Because the reality of blazing a trail is, like, I think the term comes from like actually like cutting down like foliage in the forest, and a part of making a path you have to burn. You have to burn like everything that you couldn't cut down, so nothing else grows there, and you can blaze a new trail. That's a very labor intensive, dangerous task. Why would somebody do that? they have something even more dangerous that they're trying to get away from, or something that they're trying to protect someone from. So like the danger and the risk in blazing a trail, cutting down, going in places unknown, lighting fires, so on and so forth, that's not as dangerous as what I needed to get away from, or what I need to create a path away from.
The origin of survival.
You know what I mean? Like that is the origin of survival.
Can I add like a nerdy aspect to it?
Yeah, for
so in like with crops and like cultivating the soil, part of cultivating the soil is burning it. So like it releases nitrogen back into the soil
That's
when
crazy.
you burn it.
That's crazy.
Which basically, so nitrogen is like one of the elements that we need to live. So the trailblazing in itself creates more life, which I think is crazy to think of it like scientifically, to say like this is creating more life within itself.
Wow. More life.
Scientific poetry.
No, that's the bars.
Wow.
Shout out to my wife.
Actually.
Top science teacher in the state of Tennessee.
Amazing.
No, I think that's crazy. That's such a good point, and I think it leads us to a lot of the things we're gonna be talking about today. Like the thing, I think one of the things that was really interesting is, so you had Ted, who's bringing an anthropological perspective, ourselves, who's bringing a more like on the ground grassroots work with the political analysis, the theoretical analysis, as also being like entrepreneurs and artists and so on and so forth. And also being focused specifically on the African history of coffee, the pre-colonial African history of coffee, and what the impact of that perspective could bring. I was really interested to hear, like, man, the other person who was there was a gentleman who founded the Institute, and his focus specifically when they started was on like dispelling misconceptions surrounding the health benefits of coffee, because at the time coffee sales were down pretty much globally, and so some people reached out to him from Brazil actually, and wanted him to do some research to see if there was any like academic information that could be brought to bear about the health benefits of coffee, and if that could allow farmers who were struggling to increase their sales, you know what I mean, by selling coffee not just as like a drug, but a legal drug, by the way. Shout out to the legal drug dealers out here, but also as like a health food, you know what I mean?
Brought to you by Go Brew.
So yeah, I wanted to see what oh, hold up, shout out to Go Brew. Hold up, we gotta,
Man, I left mine. Delicious. Drink that.
it's not cold brew, it's Go Brew.
It's gold.
I told you.
Not this. Not this black exploitation commercial.
I told you. I done told you.
Stop. We're not going there, y'all. We're not going there. We're not doing that.
Okay, so
We're not doing that. That ain't the trope thing.
So yeah, this brother was we getting way too lit in here. Yeah, this is what happens.
Got you lit.
This is how we
I see
decolonize
that.
coffee, is get super lit. Yeah, bro, we got hella coffee, bro.
Oh man, let's go.
Hella brews. Hello, you gotta hit him with the
ASMR.
yeah. Get you some Gold Brew if you haven't. Keep the channel alive. Join the Patreon. All those things. So back to Vanderbilt. So with hey, Bunafi
Toast to the
Nagaya.
news. Shout out Tom.
Bunafi Nagaya, Hendabino. So yeah, the brother was his focus was on the scientific elements of coffee, and it kind of landed into some of the more ethical, anthropological, historical questions as well. But it started out with science, and so we happen to have the top science teacher in the state of Tennessee right now. Was that the
That wasn't
you was in your bag? You was in your bag though.
20. When was that? 16.
Yeah. Look at you black girl blushing over there. Holla at me after this.
Okay.
So yeah, one of the things I think that's really dope about what we're doing is like a lot of what we do is like science and research based. We just don't talk about it because like what I found, and I think what you found, is that as teachers, students don't necessarily care about like they just care if it's relevant to them.
Yeah.
And so our job is to do the research and then distill it Our job is to listen to the whole sample and chop it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
people just want the chop though.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So like when
Yeah.
it comes to the science, people want the application, not necessarily all of the research that goes into discovering it.
Yes.
But what I want to do more of in this podcast is expand on like a lot of the theoretical background, the scientific background for what we're doing and why what we do is so good. And so in that point, I was curious to know, hearing this brother talk about a lot of the scientific benefits of coffee, specifically for the Black community. Like we talk about,
No.
you know what I mean?
I was I was in between doing interviews and a lot of other things, watching the panel. And every fact he said, I was like, oh, that's crazy. Like, you would have thought I was watching like a basketball game or something. I was like, yes. You know, but I,
sports.
something that I know, that's our sports, guys, okay?
Big nerd energy.
Nerds, okay.
Big black blurred energy.
And so when he said, one of the things that stood out most to me, well, first, let me just say, my sister said that he seemed like an actor portraying a doctor because some of the stats he said were just unbelievable.
Yeah.
She was like, this dude ain't no real doctor.
Yeah.
Shout out Carl. Hey, Carl.
What's up, Carl?
But I had to think about like what she was saying, and it did. Some of it was like crazy. So he said that through some of the studies that they do, there's a protective element in the coffee seed that specifically is protective against such things as diabetes, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, things that are prevalent in the African American community most.
Yeah.
I mean, by drastic measures. And how coffee specifically has protective elements for those, saying coffee was made for Black people.
Yeah.
Creative, if we're talking like creative design, it's encoded in the seed to be protective against those things that are going to be prevalent in the Black community.
Ooh,
And
that's a bar. So you saying it's encoded in the seed to protect the children of the soil?
Yeah, to
Okay.
protect the seeds.
I see what you're saying.
To protect the seeds,
Ooh,
yeah.
wow.
So,
All day.
for
God be
me,
spitting.
I'm saying.
That-
God be spitting. Shout out to God. Shout out to the Most High,
God.
bro. He be
Shout out
spitting.
God.
Yeah, poetry in the DNA.
no, seriously, that's why. I mean, and that's why scientists. It's really hard to have.
Soldier DNA.
It's really hard
Soldier.
to have the conversation of intelligent design without talking about an intelligent designer. If you're talking about a seed that comes from specifically people who would be impacted by illnesses that this is where, so the seed it comes from the people who would be impacted by these illnesses. It protects those people specifically.
Yeah, and then those illnesses proliferate as those people are separated from proximity to that seed.
For sure. And
That's
so I think what it speaks to is you can't have that type of intelligent design. You can't brew that into a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
It's in the actual,
actually gotta be
it's
built
coded,
in.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can't GMO that out. You can't, you can't. So I thought that stood out to me.
That's crazy. Absolutely.
That was my biggest takeaway. Was like,
Yeah.
Black people. No, he said Black coffee is made for Black people.
Wow.
Specifically, is how he put. I won't say that's a
That's
quote,
a
but
bar. And
that's how he said. And no, the other thing was, and I don't know if you were about to speak.
I
to
was.
this.
Well, I was. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, one of the things I was like, he's so cute. Give me cute. So I was like, yo, it's
There
crazy. So what was really interesting was that our project, specifically Coffee Black, was built to increase consumption of coffee among African Americans who self-report to be twice as least likely to choose coffee as their beverage of choice compared to other ethnic groups. And we can get into the veracity of the study or what variables were controlled, but the point is, like, there is an idea, which may or may not be true in society, that Black folks don't drink coffee. And so we started our company. The question we were asking was, do Black people drink coffee? And with Gucci Mane and Gold Brew, and the answer is obviously yes, right? We were the first people to drink coffee. But the question is, well, if we do, why aren't we seen or thought of as the originators of coffee, as the people
Which
who
is
come from the
interesting
continent?
that such a scientific conversation can turn into one of ethics.
Nah, it is, because God got bars. And I also think that, like, the whole idea of these bifurcations between or dichotomies between like, you know, all these things is just silly. Like, people want to say, like, well, this is the academic stuff, and y'all need to leave the street stuff outside. And it's like, that's just not. We're whole human beings, which is one of the things I think that was so dope when we went to Vanderbilt. Like, I didn't put no suit on. I ain't put no tie on.
That's what my mom said.
I pulled up exactly as I am.
Yeah.
And in
Yeah,
fact,
drip on,
the reason, shout out to
the
new
drip.
drop.
Yes.
Y'all seen
Yes,
this?
sir.
It's a DJ for your coffee type beat.
Yes, sir.
With the information on the back, you feel me?
Right.
Somebody put that here on the podcast. Put that on the screen
Facts,
so people
yeah.
can see. But coffee definitely was discovered in Africa in 850 BC. All 130 species of coffee are from Africa only, indigenously. And coffee generates 460 billion plus a year. They said 495 on the panel yesterday. And Africa only keeps less than 1%. It's 2 billion, I believe, is what the president of Uganda said. And you know, that's we actually dropped these when we were in Ghana. The white colorway. We dropped these when we were in Ghana for the Chance the Rapper and Vic Mensa concert at the Black Star Line Festival, because I wanted to start that conversation and kind of frame, man, there's coffee in West Africa too, right? A lot of people don't know that. Cafe Estenafila, which we have actually on these cups and on the We Deserve shirts. It's a black fruit. It's literally black like me. Shout out to Stephen Zenderman who put me on. And then there's all kinds of like biodiversity, genetic diversity in Africa, specifically as it relates to coffee, but also on everything else too, because that's where life comes from. That I feel like just that one, if you think about just that one species, Arabica, which is what most people drink, and then Robusta, has generated 495 billion a year. The amount of money, the amount of potential in these other 130 species, right? And the amount of possible theft if that potential is not given to the people who are from there. You know what I mean? And then also thinking about the amount of damage, the like, if that's there, we have to believe as people of faith that those plants are in that place because those people are in need of its benefits, right? Not that other people can't benefit as well.
And that's why you have certain trees and plants that are
like
native
they're
to
there
certain biomes
to
and
be
not everywhere.
Come on.
That's why we have a lemon. A great example. We have a lemon tree.
Yeah.
Randomly, we have a lot that we bought next door to our house. And there's a lemon tree that grows there, but the lemons don't grow bigger than like ping pong ball size.
Yeah.
And they taste terrible.
Yeah.
They never grow, but it's because this climate is not, our soil is not made to grow it. The climate is not made to grow it. And it's the same with this fruit that we're talking about. And that's part of the issue. Yeah, with coffee.
Coffee
is
African fruit.
African fruit.
Yeah.
Something that we mentioned, or that y'all mentioned as well, was food deserts. Coffee is not considered a food, which I thought that was a great point to say. Yeah, okay, so we have the food deserts concerning like grocery stores, but the issue I see even further, in now knowing so many more of the health benefits on a microorganism level, you know, like the problem there is that there aren't more coffee shops organically in Black neighborhoods that Black people can go to and enjoy those and like take part in those health benefits. And that kind of gets to when we're talking about, you know, you always mention the 4 horsemen of gentrification, and one of them being coffee shops. Coffee shops gentrify. But the issue there is we have, I think I was texting you and I said, do you think coffee is the missing link in Black health in America? We don't have a coffee culture in Black America. And considering what he's saying, he even mentioned that people should drink coffee at an earlier age to partake in those health benefits far longer before.
And protect themselves from the damages of other vices that do get people.
So he mentioned a lot of people, you notice at like the Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, they always have coffee. And how a lot of...
hey, somebody get us the AA.
We need wholesale.
You know what I mean? Come on, what's up, bro?
Y'all want to come?
Yeah,
we got you. But how there's always, you know, this idea of needing to replace specifically the actual act of, you know, of drinking, but within coffee there's like a healing element,
a protective
to it,
element. This joint really is the real world vibranium, bro.
It's vibranium.
Like,
so like he said, it's protective. There's a protective. A lot of people use it, and even he said that there a friend friend or cousin or somebody that he knew was told to increase their coffee intake when they had liver issues.
Yeah.
Because there is a protective element, which to me is
Crazy.
What do we have on every corner in black
liquor
communities? Liquor store, but why don't we have coffee shops
On every corner.
on every corner
Yeah.
or every other like
Well, let's get into that. I think that's a great way to think about it. Why don't we have coffee shops on every corner? Or when coffee shops do start to appear on the corner, like what's happening in Whitehaven right now, like a Starbucks just moved into the neighborhood. However, that community had been asking for a Starbucks for forever. And one of our other homies, Muggin, which is another black-owned shop,
Shout out
were
Muggin.
there for that community and no coffee shop. But as soon as the black people started doing it, FUBU, for us, by us, now all of a sudden there's a Starbucks. You know what I mean? And like, I think you see that happen so often, right? Where it's just like the only time people want to bring resources is when they're not for us. You know what I mean? And like, that's crazy to me,
well,
especially.
and we're forced to adapt to needing something that isn't for us.
Yeah.
Like, and so we don't get the benefits of it. Like going to
Yeah.
Starbucks and getting whatever the seasonal drink is not beneficial for us. We know scientifically.
Well, that's what we
at
got
this
into,
point,
right?
as black people,
All the sugar, all the
Yeah.
cream, which is like, this is no shade. Prop always says the best cup of coffee is the one in your hand.
sure.
So drink it how you want to.
Can we talk about? I got sent a picture yesterday.
Oh Lord, yeah. Okay, yeah, let's get into it.
Here we go.
Shit, we get spicy.
I'm not gonna go in depth at all.
Yeah, come on.
Got sent a picture of someone who is drinking a Starbucks coffee with one of our shirts on. The coffee is an African fruit. The picture was full of irony. Okay, full of irony. This is no like shots fired at anybody, but I do think the irony there is, on one hand, the best cup of coffee is the one that's in your hand, and also I think those two can be held. You know, there's not like it's one or the other.
But the sugar and cream is definitely killing us.
The sugar and cream on multiple levels. Like looking at that picture, looking at that picture,
It's crazy.
I don't know, it just did something to me in a way that was like, you know? And I'm not ever one that's gonna bash. I'm not gonna bash anybody. Okay, I'm not a Starbucks basher. I don't believe we're competing with anybody. I believe we're just doing what we were called to do.
Yeah.
So I don't think when you're called to something, I feel like there's no competition, because who's gonna compete with what God has given you to do?
Yeah. And in the last episode, we're talking about the power of collaboration and the power of being able to really walk in a role.
Because somebody else is called to something too,
Yeah,
and that's who you
right.
work with. Like, it's not we're not, especially as black people, what we look like.
Well, what's crazy is I actually got linked with the VP of supply chain management for Starbucks, which was crazy. That whole story is crazy. Like, I'm at Toyota, at the Toyota dealership, taking my mom's car because the check engine light came on. I walk in, they playing Try That in a Small Town. So that lets you know what the vibe is. We out in the suburbs.
I mean, and it wasn't long after.
This is like during the Montgomery
Brawl.
Brawl conversation, and I'm like, I'm about to walk in here. I'm gonna sit in the corner till they fix my car. I ain't gonna talk to nobody because I already see what the vibe is, right, bro? I'm sitting in there, and I hop on live, and I'm talking about like why we have an all black supply chain, which is something we're gonna get into in this episode, and how that is like why what happened in Montgomery with the Montgomery Brawl. Like with that whole thing,
Shout out, bro, that can swim.
Shout out, bro, that can swim.
Yes, like black people, let's learn how to swim.
Come on, bro. Yo, actually,
I'm talking to myself because your girl can't swim.
There's a bunch of information about like these, like surfing, like low key originated in Africa, like in
Stop.
Ghana. No, I'm not even kidding
Stop
with you. There's a
it.
whole book. It's called like Black Surf or Afro Surf. And it's about all this long history of like in Ghana specifically, black people surfing. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy because like Africa got beaches. Which is a whole other thing, bro. Why y'all always go to Europe? Can y'all tell me that? Like, why when y'all hop on a plane and save y'all little money up, every time y'all go somewhere, and there's no shade to Europe, right? Like, maybe a little bit. But like, it's like...
I mean, if somebody invite me to London...
Yeah, I'm like, it's fun.
Yeah.
Like, shout out to the
So
UK.
I can say I win.
Because the jazz is incredible right now.
Shout out UK.
But I also think that's the seasoning, though. Like, I think that's us bringing the season. So I'm not... Like, the UK Europe is diverse. So we don't want to talk about... I'm not trying to paint this monolithic thing. But like, when people go... Like, I feel like our people, African Americans, when we travel, we like... There's this weird kind of like pedestal that we put Europe and like specifically the very colonial white parts of Europe of going to, and I'd be like, bruh, it's like 52 states in Africa, 52 nations in Africa. Like y'all couldn't, you know what I mean? 50 plus states. Y'all ain't been to one, but y'all hit the coast of Spain back to back. And then hop on Instagram and complain that people was following you around the whole time. I'm like, my guy, like water is wet. Come on, bro. Like, you got options out here. That's all we saying. So it's not to tell you, I never want to yuck nobody's yum. If you like it, I love it. And to that point, like when we were talking to the dude at Starbucks, he came up. So I had this whole conversation. He came up and he was like, "Excuse me, sir, I want to talk to you." And I was like, "Oh Lord, I know how this goes." And then he's like, "I'm the VP of Global Supply Chain Management for Starbucks, and I love what you're doing." And I was like, "What in the world is like?" That's kind of crazy because that's not how one. You already know what the vibe was. I wasn't expecting that conversation to go that way. And so we hop on a call. And it actually was dope. I don't know what's gonna come of it. Like I got a chance. I was in Seattle with Mir from Mir X.
Shout out Mir.
Got a chance to hear people from Patagonia, from REI, from like a lot of dope folks speak at this retreat. Mir X is an amazing experience. And while I was out there, I went to the Starbucks Reserve Roastery, and met up with Jeff. Jeff Janot is the name of the guy who's the VP of Supply Chain Management, and actually got to hear the CMO of Starbucks speak too. He was a speaker at the conference. But Starbucks is buying like 600 million pounds of coffee a year, and I'm like, that's crazy, right? And the CMO actually talked a lot about what they do to like keep people's trust in their quality. And Jeff sent me some information about their ethical practices. And like, it was just like all very surprising. I'm still trying to figure out like, okay, this is a lot of new information. And when I went to Starbucks, low key, the Starbucks Reserve Roastery in Seattle was the most diverse coffee shop I went to in Seattle. So you got all these coffee shops with Black Lives Matter signs in front of it that are these specialty third wave, inclusive shops. Zero black people. You go to Starbucks, no sign outside the door. Black people from all over the world, like melanated people from Asia, people from Latin America, people from all over. So I'm like, Starbucks, something about their execution is actually like creating more of a sense of diversity or multi-racialness, multi-ethnicity, versus these shops that have good intentions and like admittedly poor execution and zero impact. So like then it made me think of us as a company with such big intentions, right? Like it just let me know like there's a heavy weight on our execution, because good intentions with poor execution is a net negative, is what I took away from, versus like even neutral intentions, right? Like they don't say anything about like there's no Black Lives Matter sign. I did find out they have a Black Partner Network, which was interesting too. But just because they execute on a customer service level so well, it makes black people feel like this is for me, even though they never said anything about black people. And so I'm like, even on the farmers, they're consistently buying every year from them folks for years and 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 years. So as we build out an all black supply chain, one of the things I took away, and again, like I'm not trying to take anything away from the critique of Starbucks, because I think there are critiques, you know what I mean? But I think like looking at, man, for me as a small business owner that's doing this kind of international startup thing that Coffee Black is, like my execution matters a lot. Almost more than my intention. And I took that, I was like, yo, what does it look like as we scale, for us to scale not just our intention but our execution, and to continue to grow on that? I don't know, but I think it means more conversations with people who
I was gonna say it's more relational. It's definitely more relational than like business strategic, like business strategy. You can't business strategy relationships with farmers. Obviously you have to have those things,
and we're in the midst of that too. Is like, yo, what's the P&L, like, what's
no I was like, you have to have that in place. Shout out Mayorga, we are listening to you. We hear you.
Big shout to Mayorga Coffee, you know what I mean?
We hear you. He's like, hold up, don't say you. Oh, I'm sorry, I promise you we hear what you're saying. And in the same vein, I think even as we're starting our Barista Exchange, and just weighing the relationships that we want to build, because we know this is the first of its kind.
It's kind of crazy.
It's crazy, but we know like we're dealing with people. Like we're not dealing with machines or animals. I mean, well, don't. Okay. We're dealing with people who have lives and who need to feel safe. Kind of like you were talking about earlier when you come in the shop. Like, I want to feel safe that I can enter into a relationship with you, or give you trust, or the product that I give you won't be exploited, or you won't treat me as someone who is just a prop. And so I think the relational side of that is something we're always weighing.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is because of our history, right? And let's get into that. Like, my background, one of the things that was so dope about speaking at Vanderbilt was like my grandma, Mama Jessie, my dad's mom, always wanted me to be a professor, and I was like, okay, grandma, and I actually did. I went through undergrad. I got my master's degree, and when it was time, like people were like, okay, go get the PhD, and I looked at it and I was just like, this is a hustle, bro. Like, I'm in the social sciences, you know what I mean? Like, I'm like, there's no money to be made and a lot of money to be paid, and I was like, this is a hustle. Like, I'm not gonna make none of this bread I'm spending back on being a sociology and like, you know,
Diminishing
pedagogical theorist.
Diminishing returns.
Yeah, I'm like, nah, I gotta pause. Let's go build a business, right?
Right.
I still research. I still learn. We still read peer review articles. We travel. We research. But I'm not paying for a degree again.
Sure.
But I think it's so crazy that like, as we are, without any of the things that I used to have to do when I was in grad school with the suit, and I was always trying to like express myself. But like to me, I felt like a lot of these were facetious. But it was like, yo, the ability to fully be robed in my culture and all the notes that brings, and be invited to speak at an elite university like Vanderbilt because of that. I was like, man, I wish my grandma could have seen this, bro. Like, it would have been a crazy moment. But I think it's such a beautiful thing because my grandma's husband, Daddy Clarence, was the son of a sharecropper. Or, well, he wasn't the son of a sharecropper. He was the son of someone who escaped sharecropping. And that background is a big part of why we do what we do in Coffee Black. So when I got into coffee, I almost got trapped into a very predatory relationship with an importer that is actually one of the shell companies for one of the like OG colonizer companies in coffee, like type 1616 type beat, like Dutch stealing coffee type beat,
like grandfather
their great grandkids type beat. Like, I was like, yo, that's crazy. And Mayorga, I can't talk about who they are for reasons. You know what I mean? Absolutely. Like, I'm not trying to out here get COINTELPRO'd. But, like, it was crazy because I realized in that process that, like, a lot of the money I was spending was supporting people who were employing a lot of the same practices that I later on realized were used on my great grandfather's generation, right? So the sharecropping, if you're not familiar with sharecropping was this practice that was put in after slavery to continue to get free labor from people of African descent, and it was also done to poor white people, really, but because of how many black people were in slavery and because black people were the primary free labor force in America, it was primarily something that like descendants of Africans in America were experiencing. So the way it would work is essentially you would have somebody who was just out of slavery, zero resources, struggling to get education, not really able to get lawyers or to engage in like the education necessary to read contracts. But you would have someone, a lot of times the same people who like were just previously slave owners before the Emancipation Proclamation, and they would come and say, yo, we want to give you some land to work on and we'll pay you to grow the same crops that you used to grow during slavery. And I'm simplifying this for the point of the pod, but what would happen is these people would start growing these crops, and what would happen is they would tell them, okay, cool, we're going to lend you, right, all of your tools. We're going to lend you all of your seed, right? So we're going to lend you where you're staying at. We own the place you live. We own the tools you use. We own the seed you're growing. We own the animals that you're using to be able to produce it. We own the grocery store, and we'll give you a line of credit at the grocery store for you to be able to go there. We own everything, and we're giving you a line of credit. And at the end of the year, you'll sell your crop, your harvest, and what you make in your harvest, we'll count that against your credit, and then you keep whatever's left over. Y'all can already guess how this went. You know what I mean? Like, every year, they never had a profit. Like, and if you were lucky enough to be able to have the academic skills to be able to say, like, I'm actually keeping up with my expenses, and I am able to tell you the actual cost of what I accrued, right? Or I have other options and I have other people I can go to, or I'm being creative, or my daddy called it Afro engineering on how I'm going to get the resources I need. I'm not going to go through you. Right. So therefore I actually owe you this. Nobody ever agreed. Their perspective was never accepted. Right. So it's like, regardless of what you said, nah, you actually owe me this. You called me a liar boy. And you can imagine how that went. Right. And so this practice was done for generations, and it was a way to extend the free labor that slavery brought to white landowners in the United States. Well, long story short, as we're almost getting caught up in this predatory like deal with this importing company, Martin Mayorga from Mayorga Coffee reaches out and he's like, "Hey, I see you're posting about working with X, Y, and Z. I'm gonna just let you know they like OG colonizers. Not telling you who to work with, but just be careful." And I'm like, okay, what do you mean? And we start talking about the practices that these people are using on farmers and historically have done. And he's breaking it down to me. And I'm listening to that giant and I'm like, oh, I know this song. Like, oh, like he's telling like, oh yeah, like they're lending the farmers all the seed and it's predatory lending and they own all the, and I'm like, oh, let me guess, they own all the stores in town. He was like, yeah, how did you know? And I was like, oh, let me guess. At the end of the year, every year, they're still in debt. Yeah, how did you know that? And I'm like, oh, because it's a different crop, right? These people are using this on like black and brown coffee farmers, but my great-great-grandfather's generation, who were black cotton farmers or corn farmers or rice farmers, like, it's like these are the same practices. Like, these folks was reading out the same playbook. Yeah. Like, and that's when we talking coffee, like, the number one reason why we have a black supply chain for our coffee is because we're trying to address sharecrop capitalism and sharecrop coffee. And like the practices that a lot of these businesses were using are standard practice. Just like in music, there's standard practice that's actually like super predatory and built on like slave mentality, like even the word masters, right? You know what I mean? Like, or these are the producers when we talk about farmers, right? Like, it's like, yo, we producers too when we talk about music, but different type of product. But like the way producers are treated, whether we're talking about music or coffee, is so predatory historically, especially when you look at people of color. Right. And that's one of the main reasons why I was like, yo, we want to tell a different story through these like sharecrop capitalistic traditional agricultural like seeds, right? Like we want to tell a different story with these, and that's one of the reasons why it was so important for me, like being able to tell this story in the way we're telling it and being able to source our coffee in the way we're sourcing it. Like, man, like this is deeper than just like, oh, we want to do fair trade coffee. Like, nah, I'm actually trying to rewrite a narrative that I found out has been played across multiple countries and multiple experiences of people of African descent across multiple crops, right? But the practices are the same. And many of these practices are still happening today. You know what I mean? And it's like one of those situations where it's like, bro, what would it look like for us to rewrite this narrative, right? Like, we got to learn from these stories.
I was just about to say that. Like, it steps outside of what we are allowed to do in those spaces, quote unquote. Yeah. I think in saying we're going to institute an all-black supply chain, we address issues that are specifically prevalent in our communities in a way that is not the same as fair trade. Like, fair trade gives you stipulations, and I'm not speaking against fair trade. Yeah. But just like, we're given these avenues and saying, okay, choose one. Yeah. And it's like, no, I don't, like.
And like, technically, the people who were doing the entity that shall not be named, right? Like, those people had a fair trade certification.
That's what I'm saying.
You know what I mean?
But like, I think there's always perversion in things that were initially meant to be for people's well-being. Right. Yeah. I just think creating a road, it goes back to the trailblazing, like creating a road that should have been there the whole time. Yeah. That wasn't built, specifically roads, like a road that wasn't built by the hands of trauma and slave labor, free labor. I think is necessary in our community because it not only in the business aspect does it create its own, it produces its own, I don't want to say revenue, that's not the word I'm thinking about, but basically its own fruit that continues to feed itself. But I think like for individuals, it creates this idea of, I don't have to, and I always get into the conversation of like dignity and it kind of goes into, I know we were going to talk more about my grandfather, but just like this idea of I can create a new trail. Like, I don't have to do blank. I don't have to do blank. I used to talk to my students all the time. I was a very dramatic teacher. So when I dropped them off at lunch, I would always go into these long diatribes about, and it was my boys' class, they had my heart. And I would go into these long diatribes about you don't have to be a drug dealer, you don't have to be somebody's baby daddy, you don't have to, unless that's what you want to do. I mean, obviously, if that's what
if you like it, I love it. But
I'm not gonna stop you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you know the end. You know, it's only a few results that come from being a drug dealer. But like, I would tell them you don't have to. Like, it doesn't have to be a thing you have to do. And that's something my mom always talked to me about.
Yeah.
She's like, if if there's certain stuff in your life you choose, do it because you want to, not because you have to. And I would tell them that same thing, and then I would tell them I love them. And I had a student who was like, "Why you say that to us all the time?" And I was like, "What? That I love you?" And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "Because I do." And like, and he's like, "But why you be saying all that other stuff?" And I'm just like, if nobody else tells you, you can't say that I didn't. You know, like you can't say that nobody in your life ever told you that. And I think you have that like creates a freedom in the heart and the character of a person that says like, I don't have to just fall in line. Like I don't, I can create and I can write and I can produce. Like produce is just a word that I think we keep coming back to, but just like I can redeem, like I could be the part of the redemption of something, and not the destruction of something in myself. So
yeah, and I think that's one of those things too, where it's like, man, I think our histories, specifically thinking about as Black Americans, like I the story about my granddad was like my great grandfather's name was Alexander. And he was actually able to avoid sharecropping and garner around like 90 acres is what the story goes in our family, and grow his own food on that land on his own terms, and lease that land out to other African Americans who wanted a non-predatory experience in like growing and being connected to the land. And so much of our connection to the land as Black people is traumatic globally. You know what I mean? Yep. And like him being able to provide a redemptive experience with the land for folks just out of slavery, to me, creates a responsibility for me and a legacy for me that I feel a responsibility to carry forward. And a lot of that is why in Coffee Black, I want to be so intentional about like, okay, my great grandfather was able to escape sharecropping. Eventually his land was taken, and we know how that be go. They got to flee the area because people are upset about a Black man owning land. And he comes to Memphis from Arkansas, but he brings the skills, the business skills, the social capital that like then allows my grandfather to own 4 or 5 businesses, and then allows my dad to be able to pursue business. And then now I'm the like art, like I was like an artsy nerd, but I ended up in business anyway. You know what I mean? Right. And so I'm like, how can my business continue this legacy? And as a person who's been able to experience a degree of liberation, I feel like it's my responsibility to share that. Absolutely. And so through coffee, I'm not comfortable just saying, well, as a person who lives in the West and has access now to all these resources, nah, my resources are supposed to help continue to liberate my people, which is why we have an all Black supply chain, because we want it to go all the way down the domino effect. You know what I mean? Like everybody gonna eat. Not just us. Approach. Yeah, everybody pulling up, and we all gonna be down until we all up. You know what I mean? We staying down until we come up. And like that legacy, I think, is such an important reason why we need more people who have experienced the effects of anti-Blackness, of slavery, of colonialism, people of melanated experiences, right? Whether we're talking about African Americans, Africans, people from origin who are in Latin America, South America, Asia. Like we need those people to be able to tell their own stories and to be leaders in these spaces, whether we're talking about coffee or music or corn, sugarcane, tobacco, coconuts, whatever these things that fashion, the things that we've had, that we've created, that we haven't benefited from, people want to solve the problems without us being at the forefront of the solution. And I'm like, yo, you can't just say like tweak one thing. Like that's my issue with these certifications. A lot of times it's like, well, I'm gonna get this certification and then not think about it anymore because we just have this certification. Like it's so much deeper. There's a whole experience that hasn't been heard because we aren't listening to the people who experience the brunt of the oppression. Sure. And like there's a knowledge that's there. Like how I was able to be like, yo, I don't even know what's happening in these countries, but as soon as I heard like, oh, you own the seed and you're lending it to me, I'm like, oh, I understand this song. I heard this song before a lot of times, and I know what the next melody is. Like, you know what I mean? Like
still being
I know this chord progression.
Pretty much.
Like you can hear it and be like, I don't speak this language, but I know this chord progression. Right, you know what I mean? And so I can see how this is gonna go. And I think that kind of knowledge is important because we had this dude out in we were doing a screening in Portland for the Specialty Coffee Association conference. Shout out to the homies at Deadstock. And after the screening, this dude asked me, like, well, what's the difference between the curriculum y'all are building and like the like a coffee training you can get from the Specialty Coffee Association conference? And I was like, the difference is heritage. right? This is not
a
just
bar.
culinary. And I ask this question a lot, like how much, like to understand why we're doing what we're doing and why what we're doing is so important. You got to ask yourself the question: how much money would you have to pay a Black American to let their kids pick cotton? What's the hourly rate? What's the fair trade rate that makes that practice accessible or acceptable for a Black American? There's no price you could pay me for my kids to ever pick cotton for anyone.
At any point.
I don't care if it's $1 billion an hour. The it's not an economic question first. It's a dignity question first. It's what this represents and what this says about who I am and my spirit and my soul that's unacceptable. Sure. And what people miss is about how these practices have affected communities. Like we look at the numbers like, let's just pay people more. Yeah, please pay people more and run the number up. And also, the story needs to be changed. We got to rewrite who this is, which is why we spend so much time learning about pre-colonial coffee culture. Like, there's an experience in coffee that I believe the Most High intended with all the seeds being on the African continent, all 130 species, right? Like, there's a story that could have happened. Like, what if Africans had got on a boat and brought coffee as a seed to indigenous people in Latin America and Central America and Asia? Like, what's that worth? If they had brought coffee across the continent from East Africa to West Africa, and the West Africans got to share there. Oh, we know this plant is over here. Like, yo, we got that over here. It's a different species. Y'all should do this with it. Oh, really? What if we do? Like, that world never happened. That multiverse never existed, but it could, and it should. And that's the work we're doing is fighting to allow that experience to happen. And that's why we're doing the Black Barista Exchange program. Yes. Right? Is because this is an opportunity for us to like create this mini bubble, this mini experience for ourselves.
Coffeeverse.
Yeah, this mini coffeeverse
across
the coffeeverse, right?
Yes,
like we even did like 200 different AI iterations to like imagine what it could look like for coffee to live in a liberated experience for people of the Black diaspora in the future. Like, what's the Afrofuturistic expression of that? And I think like this is important. But before we get to the Afrofuturism, before we get to the Coffee Black Barista Exchange program, like that story is my grandfather's story, but your grandfather's story is just as equally like contributive. I don't know if that's a word. I just made it up.
I like it.
to the experience of what we're doing and the story we're trying to like these rare these lost stories that we're trying to preserve and bring to the forefront. You know what I mean? Like, how does your grandfather's experience influence you to do what you're doing now? We know the science influence of you being a teacher and what you did with your boys at Fairview and like what you've been able to do there. What's the legacy, the heritage for you?
So first off, a story is not lost if it's tied to someone's beating heart. So like, don't ever call the story lost.
Yeah,
it bothers me if there's someone still attached to the name, or at some point was attached to the name of some person who you're saying their story is lost. Is not a lost story.
Just because
it's just a story you decided to hide or ignore. Okay, so let's start calling them ignored stories. You probably won't say that.
Yeah. we discovered this story.
Yeah, they're not. It wasn't ever hidden.
Yeah.
You just didn't talk about it.
Hidden in plain
You
sight.
didn't talk about it.
Come on.
I think there's a story of dignity. That's always the bell that I ring when I talk about the work that my grandfather did for my family. Shout out to my grandma. I just thought about my grandma. She is 92, almost 93. And I recently just found out. So, like, my grandfather was a sanitation worker, and he marched with Dr. King during the 1968 sanitation strike. My mom would tell me stories about how my granddad would come in with just all the trash running down his face, his head, his back, his neck. Every day, and he just come in and take a shower. I mean, he didn't come in and complain. He just came in, and that was his day. And she said he made about, I mean, he had a wife and 9 children. He made about, how much did I say she said? $6 a day, something crazy.
Yeah.
And he would come in and take a shower and, whatever. But what I learned was a part of his routine and the daily routine he would take part in with my grandma. I didn't realize it was something he did with my grandma, was drink coffee. She would make coffee for him in the morning.
So y'all had your own, like they had their own little like
they did. They
coffee
had
ceremony.
They had their own little ceremony in the
Yeah,
morning. It was probably Folgers, but and he had this green thermos that he took to work afterwards. Whatever coffee was left, he'd take it with him. And just to know specifically the thing that we have learned, this legal drug is the thing that fueled his fight for justice on a daily basis. Because even being a sanitation, never mind. Anyway, I was about to go down a rabbit hole. But the thing that fueled him building this legacy for his family, he didn't have to be. He worked at MLG&W. I found out before he was at the sanitation. Before he was a sanitation worker. It might have been the opposite way around. I might be remembering it wrong, but he was doing a work that was worth doing, and that's all the way to the strike. And so, my mom, she tells me about regularly is just like how she was ridiculed for being the sanitation worker's daughter. Wasn't looked well upon, especially he's making $30 a week. For a family of 11.
Crazy.
So just hearing about that and hearing about we got a chance to see him in a documentary where it shows Dr. King's speech and it pans to the audience and my grandfather's in the front. Just right there in the front. Yeah. And I cry every time. I got a chance to be with him as a young girl. He died when I was 11. But I would just sit with him and I got a chance to take care of him. He had diabetes and it was such an interesting swap there to hear all these stories. We would go to the marches and we would hold up the sign. I regularly would see his I'm a Man sign
from the original protest.
The original protest.
Yeah.
I would see that was something that was just a part of my everyday life, seeing that. And my uncles, when we're walking down the street at these marches singing "We Shall Overcome," my uncles with tears in their eyes. Dignity has always been a part of that story that was handed down to me. Yeah. And that's a part of the coffee story that you can't take and copy and paste. Yeah. And that's the part that was left out initially when it was stolen. And so I think for me that's something I carry, and that's why we do the work we do. Yeah. You can't teach that. That's the difference between the certification you can get with SCA and they've done the research and they've done the experimentation.
For sure. It's culinary. It's a culinary.
It's a culinary,
for sure.
And it's a science. So sure.
Yeah. Shout out to the science.
But you can't teach learning the value of a person through suffering.
And to that point, I think there's so much. Like when we went to the farm the first time, they're like, y'all are the first Black people we seen come to our farm. And like when I start hearing stories about how some buyers, not all, right, but a lot of buyers, like they're telling me people are coming here, they won't touch our kids, they won't let us.
They'll take pictures
them,
with them,
but they'll come and post up for the picture for Facebook and to put on like their website to talk about what the great relationship they have with these farmers. Meanwhile, they're like complaining about how bad it smells, won't let anybody touch you, I don't want to eat your food, and I'm leaving the same day. And I'm like, yo, when I pull up to these farms, like as a person of African descent, like the first thing I see is like, this house looks just like the house my grandma built in Alabama with my grandma and granddad built with their hands. Tin roof and all included. Like when I see the food, are y'all making hot water cornbread and greens? Like, let me pull up. I know what that is. Like we know what that we see. I see my ancestors in. Absolutely. And the people who we're partnering with is deeper than just like a marketing sticker. Like it's not just about
it's not a ploy.
This is about reclamation of stolen heritage and destiny. Like the story we was always supposed to have. I feel like this coffee, as trivial as it is, just a drink, is an opportunity for us. It's a portal for us to walk through to get back to what we was always supposed to have. We can't imagine.
Like we don't give ourselves the space to imagine it. And even you just made me think when you said about like posting the picture. How that you can take that and you see it in America. Like I had to have a conversation with somebody about how they were talking to my son the other day. And it's all well and good until my 7-year-old seems to pose some kind of threat to you in some way.
Which is wild that you feel threatened by a 7-year-old.
By a 7-year-old. Like you need to get your weight up if a 7-year-old is threatening to you. But I think it's still perpetuated. Like we're standing here in a culture and in a society that still paints us as a good photo op or a good, which is the whole love black people like you love black coffee.
Yeah.
Love black people like you love taking pictures with black children.
Yeah.
Love black people like you love. Okay.
That's a bar.
Love black children. Let's talk about that. Don't get me on my soapbox.
Come on.
But
She not a rapper.
I think I'm not a rapper.
But she spin bars.
But I'm just like, that's a part that we gotta reintegrate. Because for me, I'm not gonna get into the conversation, but I'm willing at this point. I'm like, I'll do what I need to do for my child. Like, this is my child. This is my legacy. He carries my genes, my DNA. I need you to understand how strong that DNA is, and how you will not prevail against that DNA because your fragility, basically.
Yeah.
And so it just was. It's a conversation that for me, I'm not willing to sacrifice the quality of my son for someone else's confusion or fear or comfort, like whatever reason it was that this person decided they wanted to put my son, like isolate him. I thought back, I was like, this ain't what my family do. Like, this ain't how we...
Yeah, we don't co-sign this.
We don't co-sign this, and you need to be taught that. And I'm not the one going around teaching people stuff.
Yeah.
But if it comes to the 3 and the 1, I'm going to teach you, so I don't do it. I just don't do it. And so, I think it's something that's instilled. So, like, you can't learn that at SCA. Like, you can't... You're not going to have a class about the strength of a soul. At an SCA, at an SCA,
and it's like the industry can't teach you how to smell what dehumanization smells like. Like, it's like,
don't do it.
There's just an awareness that you have, and so I think, like, because of that, it's like, man, when we look at what we're doing, like, for instance, the coffee conversation we had, there was so much conversation at Vanderbilt about the health of coffee and how many misconceptions there are and how dope it can be. Specifically, how dope it can be, like, nutritionally, as a food, as a medicine for black people, which is great. And what I love, like, Tim brought a bar out. He was like, and just like we're revisiting how healthy coffee can be, like, a part of what we have to do is make sure it's healthy for the people who grow it. Because I think what happens so often is, like, people love to go on and on about the value that, like, consuming black products can bring to people who consume it. Whether we're talking about, jazz is so creative. There's so much new. There's so much beauty. Like, people love to go on and wax eloquently, poetically about how valuable what black people make is. But the conversation very rarely goes into, well, if the thing these people made is that valuable, then those people have exponentially more value in themselves.
The movie Chevalier.
Chevalier go crazy.
Oh my gosh. How great of the story of, like, gosh, I don't know his name. It's very French. But this guy basically, like, built himself up. He was the son of a slave and of a slave master over in France. And so, he was black. He was looked at as black. He didn't get the privilege of being white in France. But his dad told him the charge. I don't know if y'all noticed that, but the charge his dad gave him was basically like, being as a Frenchman, you have to carry yourself a certain way.
Be excellent,
Be excellent, all that kind of stuff. And he did. And then there was a point that he realized with Queen
Marie Antoinette.
And Marie Antoinette, he realized, oh, dang, y'all don't see me as a Frenchman. Y'all see me as black.
Or human.
Or just a human. Y'all just see me as black, which equates to so many things other than a Frenchman. And so, like, there was so much commentary in that. And, like, speaking to that and seeing, like, man, the way that's still perpetuated, and how we as African Americans, like, that's our constant. Sorry, this chair squeaky. Yeah. That's like our constant battle is to have people see us as, like, human. Like,
we need their curiosity to extend beyond our creativity.
Yeah, because this dude was cold. Like, I went and listened to some of his, like, concertos and I was just like, oh,
Shit,
this is beautiful.
Right.
And my shorty's so smart. She said concerto. I don't even know what it is. That's
It
fire.
was beautiful, and like hearing the work that he does. And remember we watched a documentary about how Black composers are not considered they're not considered classic in the whole realm of like classical music. Like they're not considered. They're not considered founders, but them
Too many
folks
black
was
keys.
killing. Yeah, and too many black
Let me
keys.
get an all-white key piano.
All white.
Too much.
Relax.
White keys. White keys. White
Hey,
keys.
No,
I have an
we are
all-black
not
key piano.
referring to that again. So yeah, thinking about like how they loved his product until it was him.
Time to love
Right.
him.
Yeah,
and
until
it's
it
like
was
until he asks for the same. And I think like, man, that's why we say love black people like you love black coffee. Is this belief? I think it's in the book of Romans that like people have come to worship the creator, the creation more than the creator. And that's a belief about how we should interact with our world, but it also extends to people made in the image of our creator, the image of God. If a person makes something, then that thing has exponentially less value than the person who made it. That's just like, that's math, right? Like you can't create something from nothing. You know what I mean?
Your existence
this
itself has
is
more
the
value.
I am a greater sum than what I produce. So obviously because it came out of me, right? It's a fraction of me. And so like if you love this thing, I'm not saying don't nerd out about coffee. I'm not saying don't enjoy diving into, and like even today we're gonna, in this episode, part of the Patreon pack is like we're gonna do a brew recipe with the homie I Make Mad Beats and like go over how to brew a coffee, and it's gonna be dope. Like that's fire. Get into that. But everything that's there is there to lead you back to loving the creator of that thing more. You know what I mean? And you can let that preach to your soul however you gonna let it preach. But like that is a big part of what we're fighting for. Is like, there's a substance in us as people and the creator of the things that get created that like is meant to be more than the sum of its parts. And I think that people miss that. And that's why we say love black people like you love black coffee. I want to get into like one of the new coffees we have right now, which is this Afro-Brazilian joint. Right? We talked last episode a lot about like Pangea, right? And how the people in Angola who were stolen to come be slaves in Brazil ended up in Brazil, and they find like a whole world of like flora and fauna that is exactly the same as almost as what they had back home, because when you put the continents together, like they neck to neck prior to splitting, like Angola and Brazil had the same ecosystem. What's the word? Biome? The same biome, and that biome just got split. So like when those people come and they meet the indigenous people there, they're like, oh, we're the same.
Right.
Like we get it. 100% we get it, bro. So I'm like, that's kind of crazy to think about that. And like then to think that those people and their contributions is a part of what made coffee. Like if it weren't for the free labor of black folks in Brazil, there is no coffee industry. It's the thing that made it available to the whole world. And that made it a part of what we know in the West as like the working person's drink, right? Like it was available because nobody had to pay them slaves for the work they was doing.
Right.
You feel me? That free labor made the whole world have coffee as an industry.
And we're not talking about like just a tribe of black people.
The most black people on the planet outside of Africa are in Brazil. You know what I mean?
Which is crazy.
A gigantic amount of enslaved
amount.
Africans and their labor directly going to coffee, and that contributing to what we have today. Like coffee, our coffee was always meant to be a curriculum. So like it's a consumable curriculum. We say we're not a coffee company, we're an educational company with a consumable curriculum. The first coffee I wanted to introduce folks to, specifically African Americans to, was we had to start where coffee started. So that's Gucci Mane, Gucci Gang. Shout out to Tambaru and the whole squad in Uraga, right? That's that. And then like that'll always be on the menu. Most coffee companies have like 25 different coffees on the menu at all times. We have one because I'm trying to tell a specific story and I want you to make sure you start like my man Stan Lee said every comic book is somebody's first. And so like every cup of coffee is somebody's first. And I want to make sure your first interaction with us, you get chapter 1. So we got to start with Gucci Mane. Now that we've established it, we want to lean into the next piece, which is this Afro-Brazilian joint, which is like we wanted people to be able to follow the slave trade through coffee and through our coffee offerings. And so the Afro-Brazilian joint is the next one we're doing. It's currently available to people in the subscription box. And if you want to get in the subscription box, like the subscription is what's available to people it's where you get the new coffees first. Like we also have a Burundi coffee we're about to drop, 2 Congolese coffees we're about to drop, a Wash Rwandan we're about to drop, a new like super fire Ethiopian joint from Shakiso that we're about to source. We're about to bring the honey process back. Like all that goes to subscribers first. So the subscribers actually just got this joint. It's an Afro-Brazilian joint. It's called it's a pea berry, which is specifically, you want to talk a little bit about the pea berry?
I wish Sid was in here to talk about the
we could get Sid in here. Sid, you want to slide in? And
I was like, Sid came like a science teacher the other day.
Soldier.
Like, actually.
Yeah, Sid did a bunch of dope research. And Sid is about to go to Africa with us for the Black Barista Exchange Program.
The kid.
We got to wrap. I just got the button that we need to wrap soon. So hold up some numbers so I know how many minutes I got, and then I'll start the timer because you know we be talking.
Welcome to the
what
kid.
Up, Sid? Welcome to the pod.
Kid.
She going to Africa. She going to Africa. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to take 5 minutes, and I want to talk a bit about the Afro-Brazilian coffee. You did a bunch of research for the last internship, like about pea berries. And pea berry, if you don't, well, I'll let you. What's a pea berry? What is that?
So basically, in this past internship, we were introducing some new coffees, and that led to some research. And I think characteristically, I was like, okay, a pea berry, what is that? Because what we're used to coffee beans, what we see most commonly is like the bean and like the facing part with the little swivel or whatever it's technically called. I don't know.
We're gonna say swivel
It's
today.
usually flat, right? Because the beans that are inside the cherries that we know, like they come kind of like facing each other, like twins and a whatever,
Twins and a
so,
a uterus, to be clear.
So pea berries are actually like a mutation where those beans, they grow but they don't really spread apart, and they're cuter. I ain't gonna lie, they're so round.
So basically it's like a potara. It's a potara coffee. Like it's a fusion hot. You know Dragon Ball Z, like my man.
I was like, is that a Pokemon?
The potara is like the earrings, and they put it on. That's the Vegito joint. When you put it on,
Hey, she
and you
needs to
fuse
come
the
back.
potara, that's Vegito.
Gotcha.
If you do the dance, it's Gogeta.
I'm sorry,
but like,
literally.
no, it was like the pea berry is like a, you know what I mean? It's a fusion. Yeah. So basically, it's a genetic innovation.
Yeah.
Specific to when indigenous people in Africa meet folks indigenous people in South America, like you get this genetic
like you're
innovation.
growing something that isn't naturally there, and it gets a mutation, but it's still tasty.
Yeah, well, it's new, right?
It's
new.
mutation,
Yeah,
and it's like, if this is what we got to cultivate it. So for a mutation to be the thing that they like chose to be like, okay,
That's
still going. We're not filtering, filtering that out. It's still really good.
But you gotta let nature cook though, bro. Nature be putting out heat.
You do?
Yeah.
Look at
Sure.
me.
Okay, shout out to the pea berries. This joint is delicious. The notes,
It really is.
and when we talk about notes in coffee, is like these are references, right? Like you taste what you taste. I taste like gummy worms.
You said Frosted Flakes.
Yeah, Frosted Flakes.
I said wow.
And like Tootsie Rolls. Like that's what that joint tastes like to me. So we'll see what y'all taste if you're in the Patreon, you'll see like the full like brew video that we're gonna do with the homie I Make Mad Beats. But yeah, we're gonna get into it. But how you feeling about like the Black Barista Exchange Program? You just had a news article drop here in Memphis about it.
She was in the news. She was in the news looking like an
Crazy.
angel.
I know, she was putting it on.
Quite crazy.
Get the fits off.
Quite crazy.
Yeah. How you feeling? What are you most excited about?
Yeah.
And what are you most curious or nervous about going to Africa for the first time?
So I think something I've been like going over in my mind is like getting over like Black girl travel preparation anxiety, because
It's a thing.
that's the first, it's like, wait, pack this A, B, C, D. And I think what's cool is like I have such a great community of people, gracious to y'all, and just everybody in the shop that is congratulated, but also like told me how to do this, how to do that, like just there it is. Like,
Shout
if
out
you're
to
worried
T-Lay.
about it, don't. Yeah, shout out to T-Lay. Literally so many people. And like for that to not have as much space in my mind as to just like, this is an experience, you should be downloading and looking forward to that. So I feel like I've still had time to be super like reflective about it. I've been thinking about my dad a lot. It's crazy, like, you know, just because like he was a truck driver in Memphis, so like logistics in Memphis is huge. Distribution is huge. You know, and all we talk about like this integrated supply chain and like just the way that I know like he was awarded in so many things about showing up to his job every day, doing his thing, but like probably never met a CEO or probably never met anybody that was like there caring about, you know, the jobs that so many people show up to every day in Memphis. And so I get to go back and see like some of the people, the hands who produce some of this coffee that I get to brew and I get to find so much joy in and share with people like face to face, you know, like it's so cool.
Don't make me cry.
It's so
Don't make
cool.
me cry,
You know, it's really, really cool. And yeah, low-key did say that in the Daily Memphian.
Okay, shout out. Look, flex. Look, what happens in the news?
When I was in the news, I mentioned that as well.
Yeah.
In my most recent interview.
I'm super excited also that we get to go with other like young coffee professionals in the States. Like 2 from California, 1 from Florida. Shout out to Lanisa. I know her for real. Like everybody else who gets to go too. But like I think just all of our places in there is going to be so unique because I have this unique perspective of, yes, I know I'm going, but I'm still in like the processes of like, we got this to do. Like we working on this. Like it's still this unique perspective of like, you know, I know where this came from, you know, and I've seen the steps behind it.
That's
so
crazy.
I'm super excited. The air, you know, like the greenery, like I know
it's
there.
different.
Stepping off the plane.
You know,
It's so different.
In the motherland.
and I know that there's a clip from the documentary, I believe, or it was a podcast. It was a lady. She was talking about like how it's so green because of the respect that is given to, you know, whatever is grown. I think it's like terribly like not terribly messed up, but like, you know, just. And Renata, you talk about just like mountainous, like, you know, as far as you can see, just like untouched land because there's a respect for it.
What was the
you know,
G2.
Yeah,
Remember?
G2. That was the name they gave you.
They gave me the name Fertile.
Yeah.
When I was in Ethiopia.
That's my baby mama right there.
That's a
But it's basically a word. I mean, it's a word they used to describe the land, like green and bringing of life.
Yeah.
And I took that as a huge compliment because I'm like, dang, like, you know, you could have just said deer or something. You could have called me a fawn, you know, but it was so cool.
No, you know?
I don't know why I fawned. I don't know why I chose that. So
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the only thing that you know, you experience in the U.S. is like if you go like Midwest, nobody's out there that looks like us, by the way. You know, like it's very blank. And you see this beauty of land and it's like, but nobody's like benefiting from this from like a random like cabin or something, right? Like some randomly right there.
Yeah.
Versus people being able to live off of it and like grow their food and all that stuff like that. So for it to be so natural, I'm super excited for that. I'm super excited for like the coffee ceremony. It's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy.
Yeah,
I know.
crazy.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
I know. It didn't hit me last year until we were like in the Brussels airport.
Yeah.
On a layover, and I started writing in my journal, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to the motherland!" Like that's what I wrote. I was like, "I'm going back home. I cannot believe this." I said with every layover, I'm getting closer to my home. And I was just sitting there like crying. It was kids running around with kids speaking French and, you know, all this kind of stuff. And I was just like, oh my gosh.
That's so interesting because my first flight wasn't until like 2018. And I feel like I wrote something so similar. Like this person probably next to me do not know I have never been on this plane before. And I'm just like chilling but so excited for my destination. So I think that's really cool. And yeah, I don't know if you asked anxieties, but
Sure.
Yeah, black girl anxiety, travel stuff. You know, you want to make sure you got A, B, C, D, and E and F.
Edge control.
You know, like
shea
like,
butter.
but also, you know, it's the way we
baby oil gel.
You know, but like
Baby oil
also, it's the way that we decolonize and the way we bring ourselves in spaces.
To these things.
Because my first travel with y'all, I didn't know what I was getting into. I was just hopping in that van.
Yeah,
very excited.
Shout out to the Coffee Black to Africa
very
tour.
Excited.
Shout out to that van.
Worldwide tour.
Very excited.
Yo, we got like 0 seconds left,
right.
so I just wanna say a couple things really quick. One, we're so proud of you. We're so excited to be going.
We don't
on
have
this
enough
trip
time
with
to
you.
say how proud we are.
Yeah, like this
There's
is
not enough time on a
this
pod.
is
Sharing this
definitely.
time.
I think the next episode needs to be like we back from Africa. You know what I mean? Like that's definitely we gotta have the breakdown on the pod.
Sheesh.
I'm very excited about that. If you want to support the Black Barista Exchange Program, this is phase 1. We have 3 phases. There's this phase, was just taking the African American cohort. There's hosting an African cohort in 2024, and then there's producing a film to share all of these experiences. And why are we doing this, right? We want to create a culturally congruent experience for people of African descent in coffee. It's the way we've been able to. We found like that's the environment in which African Americans can start consuming more coffee is when it's for them. That a lot of the microaggressions and anti-blackness is moved out of the way, and people can get back to the seed from our motherland as our creator intended it, with no sugar and no cream. And like that's why we do a lot of the stuff we do. And if you guys want to learn more about that, just tap into our website. We can talk more. Please support the GoFundMe. Right now we raised $14,000. We're trying to raise $50,000. There's a lot of expenses to cover with doing something like this. It's the first of its kind, and we're really excited to make it happen. We know this is our creator's path. We walking in it. We blazing this trail, and while we doing it, we keeping that coffee black. Stay tuned. We got some extra content that'll be coming for folks who are part of the Patreon. But for everybody else, we appreciate you. Thank y'all so much for joining, Sydney. Thank you, Renata, for joining. We got to do this more often. You might have to be a co-host with me.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Shout out
Like
to the
Ricky
homie
Lake.
HD for sliding in too. And shout out to the homie I Make Mad Beats for everything, bro. It's amazing. We appreciate y'all. Keep that coffee black. But we out. Yee.
Coffee stay black, just like me. Don't need no sugar, don't need no cream. Coffee stay black, just like me. Black like me, 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 black like me.